Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you're having a wonderful day. Today, we're going to continue our look at upstanders and specifically those resistors who fought the Nazis and tyranny around the world around the Second World War at a great cost to themselves, sometimes, well, certainly great risk to themselves. And the first one we want to talk about is Sophie Scholl. We've already talked about Sophie Scholl when we did Monuments, if you remember. Sophie Scholl was an amazing young lady. She and her group of the White Rose, based in Munich, decided that they just could not, as Václav Havel says, they had to live in truth. They could not live the lie. And so she created, her and the White Rose, these essays, these anti-Hitler and anti-Nazi essays that she distributed anonymously throughout her university and her town. Well, as you know, she was caught and her whole group, the White Rose, was beheaded. But as you know, that symbol, it's so important today because they stood up and did the right thing. And her monument of her pages and her picture is in Munich, as we've discussed. And I think she's one of my favorite upstanders because, of course, she was young. She had her whole life ahead of her. But she did it because it was the right thing to do. And she stood by her morals. She stood by her principles, and she stood by what she really felt Germany ought to be. Our next is, again, another German. His name is Claus von Stauffenberg. Now, Claus von Stauffenberg came from a very, very, very affluent and wealthy family. And this man, who basically was promoted in the German army, into the Wehrmacht, especially in North Africa, did very well for himself. However, about 1940, 41, 42, he started realizing that Hitler was not at all what they originally thought, and that the genocidal aims of the Nazis and Hitler were something he did not want to be a part of. So Stauffenberg and a group of military leaders, including a general, General Beck, got together and plotted the assassination of Adolf Hitler. He, of course, volunteered to do it. He was injured during the Second World War in North Africa. He lost an eye, a few fingers, and he was, of course, taken out of the war. But because of his expertise, he had access to Adolf Hitler at what's called the Wolf's Lair, which was his eastern headquarters. Now, the Wolf's Lair was based in Rastenburg, which is basically eastern Poland. And from there, Hitler would direct the war with Russia. Stauffenberg was sent, and as I said, he volunteered to do it, with a briefcase full of explosives. And these explosives were on a timer, and his job was to meet the Fuhrer, shake his hand, listen to what he had to say. It was all set up. He was going to take a phone call, leave the building, but leave his briefcase with the bomb there. What transpired on what's called the July 20th plot, July 20th, 1944, is really a remarkable set of events. You see, Hitler was very paranoid about his security, and he had bomb-proof windows and sheltered windows on all of this bunker that he was staying in. Had those been closed, as they should have been, then he would have been killed. Everyone in that building would have been killed. But as it was July, and it happened to be an unseasonably hot day. And so it was so stifling that they opened the blast shelters, therefore dispersing the blast out. Moreover, Hitler was leaning against an oak table, which dispersed the blast away from him, killing the people around him. But all that happened was he dislocated his shoulder and he popped his eardrums, and he miraculously survived this plot. Stauffenberg and all his co-conspirators were executed, but he still, to this day, is a symbol of resistance and a symbol of fighting for what is right. They made a movie starring Tom Cruise called Valkyrie. It's a very good movie. You should check it out. Next is John Rabe. Now, John Rabe was a German. He was actually a Nazi, which is interesting. And he was in Nanking, Nanking, China, when the Japanese invaded. And instead of letting the people of Nanking be slaughtered by the Japanese, Rabe and some Americans and a group of 20 of these people set up what's called a safe zone. And they allowed these about 300,000 people who lived in this safe zone of Nanking, or Nanjing as it's known now, to survive. And in fact, many of the Japanese wanted to come and kill these people, but Rabe and a bunch of them stopped them at this safe zone and put themselves into peril. Rabe, of course, saved, and his compatriots saved these victims of certain slaughter by the Japanese army. It's interesting, too. Yesterday we talked about Sempo Sugihara. Sempo Sugihara is a Japanese in Kaunas, Lithuania, saving Jews, while John Rabe is a Nazi in China, saving Chinese against the Japanese. It's a unique juxtaposition of upstanders, if you think about it. So, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you've enjoyed this show on resistors. There were many, many resistors throughout occupied Europe, and of course, we remember them as heroes. And I hope it gives you inspiration for your studies. And remember, don't panic, study hard, and be safe. Be well. Have a good day.